Okay, now we are talking about differentiating generic functions. Okay, differentiating generic functions. Who remembers what I told you the word differentiating means? Taking a derivative. Taking a derivative. So we're taking the derivative of generic functions. Generic, what does generic mean? Doesn't really have a, it's just, no name, no special significance to it. So we're going to be just taking problems that are just called f of x or g of x or h of x. This is very much like if you got stuck on the back of the worksheet 2 on derivatives on that where it had f prime of 4 and f of 4 and g prime of 4 and g of 4 and you didn't know how to do those, I'm about to show you how to do that. So find h prime of x for the following. And they love to throw these on the AP test, and that's why we made a whole worksheet about it. Number 1, h of x equals 3 f of x. I want to know what h prime is. Okay, I'm going to do this one of two ways. Is this product rule, quotient rule, chain rule, or none of the above? What do you think? It could you could do it product rule. You could say that the 3 is the first function and the f of x is the second one, and that works. But honestly, you don't have to, because I taught you early on that whenever there's a constant in front of a function, what happens to that constant when you take the derivative? It just multiplied by that number. It just sits there. So this would be 3 times f prime of x. The derivative of h is 3 times the derivative of f. That's it. That's the answer. Now, if you thought about it product rule, let me show you this. Okay, here's product rule. Watch what happens. Copy 1 times the derivative of the second, which would be f prime, plus copy the second times the derivative of the first. What's the derivative of 3? 0. And what happens to that? It goes away, and so my answer is the same thing. So whichever way makes sense to you, do it that way. Okay? That second part just goes away. Number 2, h of x equals the square root of f of x minus 3, and the minus 3 is outside the radical. The square root of f of x and the radical minus 3. Okay. Now, I always told you whenever you take a derivative, change square roots to the exponent form. F of x to the what power? 1/2 minus 3. Okay? It is very important, and I will take off on the test if you don't, that you write h of x or whatever, y f of x, until you start taking the derivative, and then you better start writing h prime or f prime or y prime or whatever. Okay? This right here is chain rule. Okay? The outer function and the inner function. What's the inside function? F of x. What's the outer function? Parentheses to the 1/2. Okay? So h prime, derivative of the outer first. So that would be 1/2 parentheses to the what power? Negative 1/2. What goes in the parentheses? F of x. Do y'all follow that? Is that the answer? No. Times the derivative of the inner. How do you write the derivative? F prime of x times f prime of x. Okay. Now we just need to clean it up.
What about the minus 3?
Oh, I just kind of purposely skipped over that. What is the derivative of minus 3? 0. Yes. Glad you caught that, because I should have addressed that. Very good. Okay? Now, this being negative means it goes where? In the denominator. Yes? So we're going to make a fraction for the answer. H prime of x equals fraction 1/2. This goes on the bottom and in a square root sign. Where does f prime go? On the top. Does that look cleaned up to you? That looks cleaned up to me. That's the answer. Number 3. I'll be right
Would you
with
accept
you.
the f of x on the bottom just being 1?
Yes, I would. Okay. This one I think you can do yourself. And I'm going to let you try it because it was actually one of the problems on that worksheet that you just did. How do you, is this product rule, quotient rule, chain rule, or none of the above? Product rule. Do product rule to that right now. We'll be here after school.
I'm for sure staying after school.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
This bud over slide for you. Put that problem up there. How do you do it? I'm like answer some D.
Yes, Matt Muir who did everything in his head. Okay, here is the answer right here. You have to do 1d2 plus 2d1. F times g prime, 1d2, plus g times f prime, 2d1. How many of you got that right on the first try? Very good. Okay. Number 4. What time is it? Oh, we're good. H of x equals 4 over f of x. Okay? That is what rule? Quotient rule. That is quotient rule. Okay? So, H prime equals, what do we write first? Low D high. What is low? F of x, low, times D high. What's the derivative of high? 0. Minus high is 4, times D low. What is D low? How do we write D low? F prime of x all over parentheses f of x squared. You've got to write it that way. You've got to put it in parentheses and squared. Okay? Clean up. F of x times 0, 0. That's gone. So h prime of x. Is everything in the right place on the fraction where it should be? Yes. Quotient rule usually doesn't give you stuff in the wrong place. Sometimes it does, but very rarely. So I now have negative 4 f prime of x over parentheses f of x squared. Are we good? Okay. Last one. Number 5. H of x equals g of f of x. Blech. I like this ABCD thing I just started doing. Product rule, quotient rule, chain rule, or none of the above? Chain rule. You've got a function inside of another function. So, outer, inner. What's the inner function? F of x. Now be careful. What's the outer function? G of parentheses. G of parentheses. Okay. I'm going to go slow. No, G is a function. That's a good question. G is a function. Okay. H prime equals. What is the derivative of G of something? G prime of something, right? So we're going to write G prime of something. And what's the something? F of x. Now, did that power drop by 1 or anything? No. It's just G prime. So G prime of f of x. Then times what? The derivative of the inner. Very good. F prime of x. Okay? That's all we can do to that. And let me show you something. Look at this. You have just written down the chain rule. We just switched the letters F and G. Look at that. F prime of g of x times g prime of x, g prime of f of x times f prime of x. No, see, you wouldn't have made sense unless you understood outer inner. It was the practice of doing outer inner which allowed you to do that so quickly.
I vote we should keep doing that shortcut. Number 3.
Now, we learned what a derivative was way back before. It's the slope of a tangent line.
Yeah, but when I was in physics C,
Oh.
told me that yeah, Miss Joe.
Ah. Okay, let me stop the video and then I'll talk about that.